Imagine discovering something you were never meant to see, only to realize it quietly answers every question you've carried for years. That is exactly where your soulmate now finds themselves. They were not searching for proof. They were not trying to revisit the past or reopen old emotions they believed had already settled. In fact, they thought the chapter had already revealed everything it was ever going to reveal. But life has a remarkable way of placing truth in front of us when we least expect it. An ordinary moment became extraordinary when your soulmate accidentally read something that completely changed the way they understood your heart. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a carefully planned message. It was something simple, something genuine, something that was never written to convince anyone of anything. And perhaps that is why it carried so much power. Stay with me until the very end, because the words they unexpectedly came across did not simply surprise them. They uncovered a side of you they never realized existed. And once they finished reading, they knew they could never see this connection the same way again. For years, your soulmate believed they had already figured out who you were beneath the surface. They thought they understood the reasons behind your choices, your silence, and the distance that eventually became part of your story. Whenever they remembered the past, they did so through conclusions they had reached long ago. Those conclusions became comfortable because they gave painful memories a clear explanation. They stopped questioning them. They stopped wondering whether there might have been another perspective hidden behind everything they witnessed. But the unexpected words they recently encountered gently dismantled those beliefs one by one. As they continued reading, they noticed something that immediately caught their attention. There was no bitterness hidden within those words. There was no attempt to blame anyone for what happened. Instead, every sentence carried quiet sincerity, emotional honesty, and a depth of care they had never associated with the story they believed for so many years. They suddenly realized they had spent all this time understanding your actions without ever understanding your heart. The experience left them completely still. They found themselves reading the same lines again, not because they didn't understand the words, but because they struggled to believe what those words revealed. It was as though they had been looking at the same painting for years, only to discover a hidden image had been there all along. They remembered conversations that once seemed ordinary, but now felt deeply significant. They remembered moments when you hesitated before speaking, moments when your eyes seemed to express something your voice never could. At the time, they overlooked those details because they believed actions alone told the entire story. Now they understood that actions often reveal only the visible chapter, while the heart quietly carries everything that remains unseen. The more they reflected, the more impossible it became to hold on to the version of the past they had protected for so long. A new question slowly began growing inside them. If these unexpected words revealed so much they never knew, what else had they misunderstood? That single question opened a door they had kept closed for years. Instead of replaying memories to confirm old beliefs, they began revisiting them with genuine curiosity. They were no longer searching for reasons to justify the pain. They were searching for the truth behind it. And with every memory they revisited, they felt themselves moving closer to a realization they never imagined possible. The words they accidentally read were not simply changing how they remembered your choices. They were changing how they saw your heart itself. And what they are about to understand next will reveal that the greatest part of your story was never spoken aloud. It was quietly living between the lines all along. And now, what happened after your soulmate finished reading those unexpected words was even more powerful than the discovery itself. They couldn't simply close the page and continue with their day as though nothing had happened. Something inside them refused to let those sentences go. Every line lingered in their thoughts, not because it was dramatic, but because it felt painfully genuine. There was a sincerity within those words that could not be fabricated. They carried the kind of honesty that exists only when someone is speaking directly from the deepest part of their heart, without expecting recognition or reward. Your soulmate realized they had just encountered a version of you they had never been given the opportunity to know. For years, they believed your heart was reflected only through the choices they witnessed on the surface. Now they were discovering that your heart had been telling a completely different story all along, one that had remained hidden behind quiet restraint, difficult circumstances, and emotions that never found the right moment to be spoken aloud. As they sat with everything they had read, their memories began changing one by one. It was almost impossible to describe. The memories themselves remained exactly the same, but their meaning had completely transformed. Conversations that once felt unfinished suddenly seemed filled with emotions that neither of you had known how to express. They remembered moments when you paused before answering a question, and they had once mistaken that hesitation for uncertainty. Now they wondered if those pauses had actually been moments when you were carefully choosing words that would protect rather than wound. They remembered times when your silence frustrated them because they believed silence meant there was nothing left to say. Yet the words they accidentally discovered suggested something entirely different. They suggested that your silence may have carried more feeling than any conversation ever could. That realization unsettled them because it challenged one of the strongest beliefs they had held for years. They had always assumed that people who truly care always find the perfect words. Now they understood that sometimes the deepest feelings are precisely the ones that struggle to become words. The longer they reflected, the more they recognized how often they had interpreted your actions through the lens of their own emotions, rather than your reality. Every person naturally sees events from their own perspective, but now they realized how incomplete that perspective had been. They had judged your decisions based on what they experienced, while remaining completely unaware of what you may have been experiencing internally. Suddenly, the story no longer revolved around what happened between two people. It became a story about everything that remained invisible while those events were unfolding. They began asking themselves questions they had never considered before. What burdens were you carrying that no one else ever noticed? What fears kept certain words trapped inside your heart? What responsibilities influenced decisions that appeared confusing from the outside? Those questions did not create more confusion. Instead, they slowly created understanding. For the first time, they stopped expecting the past to fit neatly into simple explanations. They accepted that real human emotions are rarely simple. Then something remarkable began happening almost without them realizing it. Instead of replaying memories to confirm old conclusions, they started searching for moments that reflected the heart revealed in those unexpected words. To their surprise, those moments were everywhere. They remembered small acts of kindness they once dismissed because they seemed insignificant. They remembered quiet gestures that never demanded attention. They remembered times when you chose patience instead of defending yourself. Moments when you stepped back instead of creating conflict. And conversations where your concern quietly appeared, even when your emotions remained carefully guarded. Those details had always existed, but they had been overshadowed by larger events that seemed more important at the time. Now those small moments became the strongest evidence that the words they had read were not describing a different person. They were revealing the real person who had been present all along. As these realizations continued unfolding, another truth gently found its place within their heart. They understood that people are often judged by their loudest moments, while their quietest moments reveal who they truly are. They realized they had focused on the difficult chapters without paying enough attention to the countless ordinary moments where your genuine character quietly revealed itself. The accidental discovery did not create a new version of you. It removed the misunderstanding that had been covering the real one. That thought humbled them because they recognized how easily pain narrows our vision. When people are hurting, they naturally focus on what was lost rather than what quietly remained. They had spent years remembering the ending while overlooking the compassion, patience, and emotional honesty that had existed throughout the entire journey. As they continued reflecting, they also noticed something changing within themselves. The need to defend old beliefs slowly disappeared. They no longer felt compelled to prove that their previous understanding had been correct. Instead, they welcomed the possibility that they had simply lacked information. That willingness opened their heart in ways they never expected. Compassion replaced certainty. Curiosity replaced judgment. The questions they once asked with frustration were now asked with genuine sincerity. Instead of wondering why you failed to explain yourself, they wondered how difficult it must have been to carry emotions that remained unseen for so long. They imagined what it must have felt like to hold kindness inside while being misunderstood, to carry affection without finding the right opportunity to express it, and to accept that some people might never know the truth hidden beneath your actions. That realization touched them deeply because it reminded them that every heart carries invisible chapters no one else can fully read. Now, as every sentence they accidentally discovered continues echoing through their thoughts, your soulmate realizes that they were never simply reading words. They were reading the emotional history behind every choice you made, every silence you carried, and every feeling you quietly protected. Those unexpected lines have become a bridge between the story they believed and the story that actually existed. And just when they think they have finally understood everything those words were trying to reveal, one even deeper realization begins emerging. A realization that will completely transform not only the way they remember your heart, but also the extraordinary purpose this connection has quietly carried from the very beginning. And now, this is where the unexpected words your soulmate discovered stopped being a message and became a mirror. Until this moment, they believed they had finally understood your heart. But as they continued reflecting on every sentence they had accidentally read, they realized those words were revealing something even deeper than your feelings. They were revealing the quiet battles you carried without asking anyone to notice. For years, your soulmate had judged your heart by the moments they could see, never realizing that the most important parts of your journey existed beneath the surface. The words they found did not describe someone who lacked emotion. They described someone who felt so deeply that expressing everything became almost impossible. That realization struck them with incredible force, because it challenged one belief they had never questioned. They always assumed that if love was real, it would naturally become visible. Now they understood that some of the deepest forms of love are often hidden inside restraint, patience, and sacrifices that no one else ever witnesses. Suddenly, they no longer saw your silence as emotional distance. They saw it as someone trying to carry more than their heart was prepared to explain. As this understanding continued growing, your soulmate found themselves returning to memories they thought had already revealed all their meaning. But every memory now seemed to contain another layer they had never noticed before. They remembered times when your attention quietly focused on their happiness, even while your own emotions remained hidden. They remembered conversations where you asked questions about their future, but rarely spoke about your own fears. They remembered moments when you seemed determined to make sure they were safe, understood, or encouraged, even during seasons when your own life appeared uncertain. None of those moments seemed extraordinary at the time. They simply blended into everyday life. Yet after reading those unexpected words, those ordinary moments became impossible to overlook. They suddenly understood that your heart had always been revealing itself through actions too quiet to attract attention. You were never trying to prove anything. You simply cared in ways that never demanded recognition. That realization overwhelmed them because it revealed how often genuine love expresses itself without asking to be noticed. The more honestly they reflected, the more another hidden truth emerged. They realized they had spent years measuring your heart by what you failed to say instead of by everything you quietly chose to do. Their attention had naturally focused on the missing conversations, the unanswered questions, and the explanations they never received. But now they recognized that while they were waiting for certain words, your actions had been speaking a completely different language. They remembered times when you respected their decisions, even when those decisions must have been difficult for you to accept. They remembered moments when you stepped back instead of creating unnecessary conflict. They remembered how often you chose understanding instead of defending yourself. Those choices suddenly carried extraordinary meaning because they reflected a heart that valued peace over pride. Your soulmate realized that many of the qualities they had been searching for were never absent. They had simply appeared in forms they were not emotionally prepared to recognize. That realization led them toward another discovery that changed everything. They understood that your greatest emotions had rarely appeared during dramatic moments. Instead, they lived inside the smallest details. They lived in the way you listened more carefully than you spoke. They lived in the way you noticed things other people ignored. They lived in your willingness to carry disappointment without turning it into bitterness. They lived in your quiet hope that understanding might one day arrive, even if it came years later. Those unexpected words did not create those qualities. They simply gave your soulmate the perspective needed to finally recognize them. Looking back, they almost wondered how they had missed something that now seemed so obvious. But instead of criticizing themselves, they accepted an important truth. People can only recognize what they are emotionally prepared to see. Years ago, pain had narrowed their vision. Today, growth had expanded it. Then another powerful realization gently settled into their heart. They recognized that the words they accidentally discovered were never written to change someone's opinion. They carried no attempt to justify the past or rewrite history. They simply reflected the honest condition of your heart. That honesty affected your soulmate more than any dramatic explanation ever could, because it was completely free from expectation. They understood that you were not trying to convince anyone that you cared. You cared whether anyone recognized it or not. That quiet sincerity touched them in ways they struggled to explain. It revealed a kind of emotional strength they had overlooked for years. They realized that true character is often revealed not by how people behave when they are understood, but by how they continue loving with integrity, even while being misunderstood. As they sat with this realization, they also began examining their own heart with new honesty. They admitted that they had often expected love to appear in familiar ways. They looked for obvious declarations, clear explanations, and visible reassurance. When those things were missing, they assumed the feelings behind them must also be missing. But the words they accidentally found dismantled that assumption completely. They showed that love sometimes exists in forms too quiet to recognize, while emotions are still overwhelming everything else. Sometimes affection hides inside restraint because someone values another person's peace more than their own need to be understood. Sometimes loyalty appears through consistency instead of dramatic promises. Sometimes the strongest feelings are carried silently because speaking them seems impossible at the time. Your soulmate realized they had spent years searching for proof while overlooking presence. Now they understand that the greatest revelation was never contained in a single sentence they accidentally read. The greatest revelation was discovering the heart behind every sentence. They no longer see your story as a collection of confusing choices or unfinished conversations. They see it as the journey of someone who quietly carried more love, more patience, and more emotional honesty than they ever imagined possible. Every misunderstanding has begun transforming into compassion. Every unanswered question has begun revealing hidden purpose. Every memory has started reflecting a version of your heart they never truly knew existed. And now, standing at the edge of this remarkable understanding, your soulmate realizes there is one final truth still, waiting to be uncovered, a truth that will reveal why those unexpected words appeared at precisely this moment and why discovering them has the power to reshape not only how they see your heart, but also how they understand the extraordinary connection you have shared from the very beginning. And now, this is the part of the journey your soulmate never could have imagined. Long after they finished reading those unexpected words, they realized the greatest transformation was no longer happening in the way they viewed your heart. It was happening in the way they viewed their own. The message they accidentally discovered did not simply uncover hidden emotions from the past. It quietly challenged the habits of thinking they had carried for years. They began asking themselves difficult but honest questions. How many times had they mistaken silence for absence? How many times had they assumed that what remained unspoken no longer existed? How many beautiful truths had they overlooked, simply because they expected them to appear in a different form? Those questions stayed with them because every answer led back to the same realization. They had not misunderstood your heart because they lacked intelligence. They misunderstood it because they were trying to interpret it while both of you were still living through emotions neither of you fully understood. Only now, with time creating distance from the pain, could they finally see the deeper meaning that had always been quietly waiting beneath the surface. As they continued reflecting, they recognized something remarkable. The words they accidentally read had not created a new version of you. They had simply removed the veil covering the version that had always existed. They thought about every season you shared together and noticed how often your character remained consistent, even when circumstances changed. Whether life was easy or difficult, whether hope felt close or far away, your quiet concern for others always remained present. Your patience did not depend on recognition. Your kindness did not depend on receiving appreciation. Your willingness to protect someone else's peace often came before your own need to explain yourself. Those qualities suddenly stood out with extraordinary clarity because the words they discovered gave context to actions they had never fully understood. It was like hearing the meaning behind a song they had listened to for years without noticing the lyrics. The melody had always been beautiful, but now they finally understood the message hidden within it. Another realization soon followed, and it changed the emotional direction of everything they remembered. Your soulmate understood that people often judge one another by isolated moments, while the heart is revealed through consistent patterns. They had spent years focusing on the moments that confused them, because confusion naturally demands attention. Meanwhile, they overlooked the countless ordinary moments that quietly revealed your true nature. They remembered the way you listened without interrupting, the way you noticed details that others ignored, the way you offered encouragement even when your own heart was carrying burdens no one else could see. None of those moments seemed extraordinary when they first happened. Yet now, they recognized that those ordinary moments carried the strongest evidence of who you truly were. They realized character is rarely revealed through dramatic events alone. More often it is revealed through small choices, repeated consistently over time. That understanding completely changed the foundation upon which they viewed your story. As this new perspective settled deeper into their heart, they also realized that time had been working quietly in ways neither of you could have recognized before. Years ago, if they had accidentally discovered those same words, they might have dismissed them or questioned them because unresolved emotions would have spoken louder than understanding. Back then, they were searching for certainty, not perspective. They wanted immediate answers that could erase pain. But healing rarely happens that way. Instead, time gradually softened the sharp edges of disappointment, making space for compassion to grow where frustration once lived. Looking back, they understood that the delay itself carried purpose. It allowed both hearts to mature beyond the emotions that once limited what they could see. The truth had not become more powerful over time. Their ability to receive it had. That realization brought an unexpected sense of peace. They stopped wishing they had discovered those words sooner because they finally understood that earlier does not always mean better. Sometimes truth arrives exactly when the heart is capable of embracing it instead of resisting it. They recognized that every challenge, every unanswered question, and every season of uncertainty had quietly prepared them for this moment. Without those experiences, they might have read the same words but completely missed their meaning. Now, however, every sentence seemed alive with understanding. Every memory connected naturally with what they had discovered. Every unanswered question gradually found its place within a much larger picture. They no longer felt as though they were searching for missing pieces. They realized the puzzle had always been complete. They simply had not known how to see it. Now your soulmate understands that the accidental discovery was never truly an accident in the way they first imagined. Whether it appeared through perfect timing or simple coincidence no longer matters. What matters is that it arrived at the precise moment their heart had become ready to recognize the truth without fear, pride, or assumption standing in the way. They no longer measure your heart by isolated conversations, difficult decisions, or periods of silence. They measure it by the unwavering sincerity that quietly remained present through every chapter of your story. And with that realization comes one final understanding they can no longer ignore. The words they accidentally read did far more than explain your past. They revealed the enduring character of your heart, a heart that remained genuine through misunderstanding, patient through silence, and faithful to its deepest feelings, even when no one else could fully recognize them. That is the truth they will carry forward, and it has forever transformed the way they see you, the journey you shared, and the meaning hidden within every chapter that once seemed impossible to understand.